Let's welcome Noah Alper to USF. Welcome.
Thank you, Professor Whitty, and wow, what a great audience. Must be a lot of bagel eaters in the house here. It's a pleasure to be here at USF and it's such a big assemblage. As was said, my name is Noah Alper, and I would have to admit that I have been a serial entrepreneur for over 35 years. I've started 6 ventures, 4 of which were successful, so I felt with a 666 batting average, I had the credentials to write my book, Business Mensch, Timeless Wisdom for Today's Entrepreneur, to help today's entrepreneur navigate the troubled economic waters we find ourselves in today. My book is not only about the bottom line, but it's also about the soul and the connection between the two. Recently, I was speaking in New York, and as I was coming in from JFK Airport, there was a big a billboard, and in classic New York style, it said, "Recession 101." And I think that's kind of one of my messages today, is that despite you folks going out into kind of a tough economic world out there, I think it's about how you feel about yourselves that's going to propel you forward in this time. In 1996, after only 6.5 years, my company, Noah's Bagels, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which was then the largest kosher retailer in the United States, with 38 stores from Seattle to Los Angeles, sold for $100 million. But 27 years previous to that, as a college senior at the University of Wisconsin, I was actually locked up in a psychiatric hospital for 9 months. It was the late 60s, the Vietnam War was raging, and Madison was one of the epicenters of the anti-war movement. I was uncertain about my future, where I was going. I was smoking too much marijuana. I was involved in political activity, and I just simply went barreling over the edge. And only after my parents took me home, and very, very slowly, after recovering from the hospital in the late winter of 1970, I was finally able to hold down a menial job at my brother-in-law's book warehouse, sort of shelving books and filling orders. Eventually, I felt a little bit more confidence, and I was able to hold down a retail cashiering job at his Harvard Square bookstore. And I wanted to tell you all of this because I wanted to shatter the myths about what it takes and what it doesn't take to become a successful business person or entrepreneur. So one night, while living in Cambridge, outside of Boston during this period, I fell in love, and it wasn't the typical kind of love that we're used to hearing about, but it was kind of the love of a salad bowl. These were rustic wooden salad bowls that were made in Vermont. And in those days, what was rustic was in, and what was plastic was out. And so this was kind of the right thing at the right time. And when these bowls were rubbed with vegetable oil, they really glowed. I got so excited about these bowls that I got into my VW bus and went up to Vermont virtually the next day after this dinner and got $1,000 worth of these salad bowls, and I put them under the seat and in the back and in the trunk and everywhere I could find room. And I started back towards Cambridge only to hit a blinding blizzard, have the VW bus go off the road, go into a guardrail, and had to rent the biggest Lincoln made just so I could fit these salad bowls in. Drove them back to Cambridge and spread out an Indian bedspread over the back of the trunk of my rental car and put these $1,000 worth of bowls out there, and within an hour and a half they were all gone. So I knew that my first business, the Alper Wooden Bowl Company, was born. It was a case of being in the right business at the right time. And I think if there's one thing that I've done successfully in the 3 major successes I've had in business is to sort of identify a trend that's just emerging. It's not emerged so far that you have tons of competition and you're basically out-positioned before you even begin, and not too soon that nobody gets it. In the case of the gourmet housewares business, that was really just at the very beginning. I know a lot of you weren't born then, but it was a time when America's food habits were changing. Previous to that, we were eating canned green beans, and if you were lucky, you got a frozen vegetable. There was very little fresh fruit, fresh vegetables weren't common staples in people's houses. It was a different time, and through having a lot of people having traveled to Europe, and Julia Child was very popular on TV. I know there's a new movie about her. Interest in fine cuisine became very, very important. And this housewares business that I got involved in, starting out with the salad bowls, and then it eventually developed into a gourmet housewares wholesale business with imports from 8 different countries, and sales to over 2,000 accounts nationally, small cookware stores and gift stores and gourmet stores. Started out doing that, selling these salad bowls on the street, got bigger, started to do some local wholesale business, and then I had another idea, which was natural foods. This was, again, in the early 70s, back in the dawn of time. And natural foods was something also that wasn't very much known. Healthy eating. In those days, there was no such thing really as natural food stores. There was a handful of them. There was nothing like Whole Foods Market. What it mostly was stores that sold vitamins, that sold distilled water, sold, if you were lucky, you'd get sort of a Tiger bar, a health bar, but there was no such thing as going in on a week in, week out basis and purchasing your groceries there. So this was very much of a pioneering effort, and the first year or two in that business was really a challenge because not too many people got it. So in that case, I was really a little bit ahead of my time. And as it started to come, to really get popular and started to develop a following, the confinement of being in this one retail store really sort of got to me. And I'm kind of a guy that likes to start businesses, and then once they're up and running, I'm kind of ready to get on to the next business. So in the case of this store called Bread and Circus, after 3 years of operation, sold the business, and the new owner took the basic concept and developed it into a 6-store chain, which was the largest natural foods operation in the Northeast, and in 1994 sold the business to Whole Foods Market, and Bread and Circus, which was the name of the store that I had started, became part of Whole Foods Market. As I mentioned before, I then got very involved in the housewares business and developed that, and in 1984 I sold that business, which then was called Alper International, this gourmet housewares business, and as a prelude to moving to the West Coast, which is what I was planning to do, I had some vacation time coming to me, if you will, because I really worked hard and I had made some money off of this business, and I wanted to take a vacation. I decided to go to Israel, being Jewish and having never been there. I wanted to see what it was all about. I came back very excited about the land, the people, the spirit, and I was determined to tie my next business to the land of Israel. Ronald Reagan was in power, and I heard this statistic that 1 in 3 Americans had admitted to a born-again Christian conversion. And I heard that statistic, and I said, so that means at that time there were 250 Americans. It was roughly 85 million Americans had a very strong religious sense, which indirectly or directly tied in with the land of Israel. So I felt there was a real opportunity to be able to sell gifts and foods from Israel to this population in America. I worked at this business for the better part of 4 years, and I would admit that it was a total, absolute, and complete failure. There was nothing right was done with that business. The products were wrong. I didn't understand my customers, and if there was a mistake to be made, I made it. And I also want to say, though, that sometimes, you can learn a whole lot more from your mistakes than you can from successes, because if you have a tremendous success, you just assume, hey, you know what, the next thing I'm going to do is going to be fantastic as well, because I was successful at this last business. Whereas if you had a failure, and if you can get yourself up off the mat, then you can go into your next business and say, okay, what did I do wrong in that business that I could correct in the next business? I was really kind of in a desperate place, because I had 2 kids and I had a 3rd kid on the way, and I had this failed business, and I had only worked for myself. I had been an entrepreneur my whole life, and the idea of getting a job and working for someone else, was something I was not really used to. I didn't know if I had the personality to work for anybody else, a little bit too independent. Just about this time, my brother Dan came along with the idea of opening up a bagel place in Berkeley. He had seen a bagel place in Montreal. He was very excited about it. He showed me a picture on his video that was video camera was about this big in those days. It was amazing just to see a video, real-time video. I looked at it, I thought about it, and I took a year sort of exploring the bagel business. Went to New York, where the traditional bagels, the home of the bagel in America was, and I talked to a ton of people and asked a lot of questions, which is something that I'm very fond of doing, and learning about a business that I really knew nothing about. I had my doubts as to whether I had the kind of the personality and the knowledge of how to bake bagels, but after a year of exploration, I was convinced that not only could I do it, but this was something that was going to be very successful. Because what was happening, and I learned this from my explorations in the bagel business, that bagels was becoming an American food item. It was no longer a Jewish specialty. It was very much like when I grew up, if you wanted to get pizza, you had to go to the Italian section of Boston. You couldn't just go and get pizza at the mall. Of course, there was no malls to go to, so that was very easy. But the same thing was happening to bagels, was that bagels was becoming something that was a mainstream item. And having been in the housewares business and coming to San Francisco every year to the gourmet products show that was held here, I noticed that that San Francisco had every great kind of ethnic food that existed, from Thai food to Indian food to Mexican food to you name it. But there weren't any really great bagels. So I felt, again, like the housewares business, that there was something that was about to come onto the scene that hadn't really come on in full force, and that I was positioned to bring something to market that really had the possibility of being a major success. And I learned this by, again, having talked to a lot of people and having seen that bagel places were starting to get popular in places like Wichita, Kansas, and places that were very far away from Jewish population centers. And so I felt that if I could come up with a great product and have a great looking store and treat people well and so forth, that this business could be successful. It was a little bit dicey, because it was like sort of like my last bit of money in the bank went into this business, along with some loans from my 2 brothers. But from the first day that store opened on College Avenue in Berkeley, it was an enormous success. And it was especially exciting coming on the heels of the Holy Land Gifts Company, which was a total failure, to then come into this business and like, whoa, it was like kind of like being on a roller coaster ride. And all of a sudden, seeing lines around the block on Sunday mornings when I would come to work was just an amazingly thrilling experience. I've discussed some of the winning steps towards a successful business operation, but as Professor Woody was saying, I think that really what put Noah's over the top was not only our great product, but it was how we treated our customers, it was how we treated our employees, and it was how we treated and interacted with the communities that we served. And to sort of give you an example, before we would open up our store, we would do a community service project in the neighborhood. And I can remember in particular in Venice Beach, in a kind of a rough part of LA, this particular neighborhood we were in, we sent our crew out and we paid them for the day. we sent them to do a community service project. In the case of Venice Beach, we painted an old woman's house in one day. We got there about 6:30 in the morning. We left about 8 o'clock at night. When she came at when we came in at 6:30 in the morning, she was in a ramshackled old house, and by 8 o'clock at night, it was a place looked like a brand new house. She was really thrilled. The community was thrilled that they were getting a neighbor such as this that cared about the community to that extent. The employees were really excited that they worked for a company that would pay them to do kind of work like this. For a day, they got to know one another. When they came into work the next day, they had bonded. They felt good about the company, and they gave some real enthusiasm and energy to the business that translated into the customers being taken care of, and those grand openings kind of, in a way, encapsulate our approach to business, which was that doing good is good for business, and that if you take a long-term perspective, and if you build a business sort of one brick at a time, which is kind of a revolutionary concept in today's world. We want to strike it rich on the internet. We want to come up with the latest, greatest idea and go to the moon, which sometimes can happen. Some of you in here could be, the next Google, the next Microsoft. But oftentimes, building it slowly and carefully is a much more stronger recipe for success than trying to do something very fast. And by keeping all these various constituencies in mind, the customers and the employees and the communities, and really taking their interest at heart while you're doing your business, you'll get paid back for it. And sort of what goes around comes around. In 1995, getting back to the sort of the chronology, we're expanding very, very fast, and we're looking for a strategic partner. We had been co-locating next to the Starbucks stores just sort of organically because we had both primarily breakfast day part. We had similar type of demographics, and when we were looking for a partner, they were a logical candidate. Working with them and with their real estate people, we were able to get real estate locations, suitable for both Starbucks and Noah's side by side, and the synergy between the two businesses was really excellent. They had a great attitude towards their employees, where they're bringing them on to their health care plan, even as part-timers, and so there were a lot of similarities in our corporate culture. And so we sold 25% of the business to Starbucks, and they became a major and important partner. We also by then had a venture capital partner, and together we were really going to town. But then we had a serious threat, and that was from a company called Einstein Brothers Bagels in Golden, Colorado. This was a public company, had a lot of resources, and they gave us two basic options, and those options were: we could sell the business to them. That was the first option. And the second option was, if we didn't want to sell the business to them, we could look for an Einstein Brothers bagel store across from every one of the Noah's bagel stores up and down the West Coast. So it was kind of a hairy decision. We had quite a smooth ride. We, at that point, had over 30 stores. I had started with that one store on College Avenue. It was a tremendous ride. And what do? Well, the offer wasn't an all-cash offer. It was a stock offer. And we also felt that the business was slightly undervalued at the price that they were willing to pay. So we decided we were going to hold them off, and we were going to build a national company ourselves. And we got lean and started to think strategically. And I want to make a point that competition is really good for business. It's what keeps you sharp when you're doing too well and you don't have anybody breathing down your back. That's when you're in trouble. So I always advise aspiring entrepreneurs that even if you've got a business and it starts to really take off, pretend there's someone breathing down your back, because you know what? Sooner than later they will. And so in our case, we positioned ourselves to take on the Einstein Brothers Bagels Company. But less than a year after they made their initial offer, they came back with a second offer, which was a full cash offer, and it was for the right price. and we decided to take it, and we avoided a bloody bagel shootout in the Wild West as a result of taking that offer. In my book, I talk about not only working hard and how obviously important it is for an entrepreneur. I'm fond of saying if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be ready to jump off a diving board knowing there's about 90% chance that there's water in the pool. You also have to be able and willing and ready to work about twice as hard as you would in a regular corporate 9-to-5 job, because that's kind of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. You need to kind of live it, breathe it, and be obsessed by it. And sometimes that can get in the way of relationships, of mental health, of physical health. And it's important during the time that a business is being built to take some perspective. In my case, I found my way back to traditional Judaism, so with that came the Sabbath. I was just talking to someone earlier about the olden days when stores used to be closed on Sundays and people would get a little rest. You know, the alien concept in today's 24/7 world. In my case at Noah's Bagels, I did take one day off. I did not work. I told them that if the place burned down, to get somebody else to take care of it because I was out of commission. And that having that carved out rest time was extremely important to me to keep my sanity and to keep me more productive than I would have been had I worked 24/7. You know, everybody here has got some kind of cell phone. You're going home and you've got some kind of technology that you're involved in, probably, if not 24 hours a day, maybe 23 hours a day. I know college kids don't sleep a lot, so chances are you're texting and doing whatever in the middle of the night. My advice, turn it off for a little while. Take a walk in the park. Smell the roses. And what will happen is you'll find yourself getting more insights into your business endeavors than you would had you gone flat out. I think what we're sorely lacking in today's world is reflective time. And I am convinced that carving out that reflective time will in the long run benefit you. So I had a dream after selling my business, and that was to go back to Jerusalem and learn everything about Jewish thought that I never learned as a kid in Sunday school because I didn't pay enough attention. And so I went to a traditional yeshiva, which is a sort of a higher education for Jewish thought. I spent a year there. It was a great endeavor, living like an immigrant in a foreign country. I came back and almost immediately was asked to help in a volunteer role of founding a Jewish community high school, which opened in 2001, 10 days before 9/11, right here on Scott and Ellis, just around the corner. It was a fabulous and interesting experience for me. I'd never been involved in a nonprofit. I found it way, way harder to do than a for-profit business. You had to have committee meetings, you had to have buy-ins, you had to have, the stakeholders had to be happy, and endless discussion. But at the end of the day, I feel a lot more excited about having accomplished the establishment of that institution than I do even of the Noahs with all its success, because of the kind of the pleasure of the soul you get from doing an endeavor that's beyond you, that's beyond money, that's serving, that's serving others. So after 4 years of this full-time volunteer work, I again had the kind of itch to get back into the food business, because any of you that are involved in the food business, you know it's a little bit of a disease. Once you're in it, it's hard to, you miss the action. It's a very, very fast-paced and exciting kind of business. So I opened up a kosher Italian restaurant in downtown Berkeley, and we had a great 4-year run, but I made one of the basic mistakes in business that I'd warn you not to make, which is not to pay attention to the 3 most important things in business. And I had occasion to speak to an 8th grade class, and one of the kids reminded me of what that was, and that's in the retail business. It's location, location, and the third one being location. And in downtown Berkeley, that neighborhood was changing, and it started out pretty positive, and by the time the 4 years came, the movie theater that was next to us closed down. And it was kind of tough times in downtown Berkeley, and really is, unfortunately, to a large extent. And my restaurant was a victim of that downturn. But we did okay. We sold the business. It wasn't a total loss. And in 2008, and in response to many requests, I decided to go into my own consulting business, which I'm doing now. I'm consulting with small businesses and aspiring entrepreneurs, and giving them some mentoring from the 38 years of my business career. And at that same time, I felt that I sort of had a book in me, that I had a lot of experiences. I had a lot of things that had happened to me that I felt would be important to share with others who are starting out on the road to entrepreneurship. And so I wrote my book, Business Mensch. It took me roughly a year to write this book, and it came out last fall, and I've been going around speaking and talking about my book. And it's been a really exciting year, going around to college campuses I went to Google and gave a talk on Google, and they had a remote feed into their San Francisco office, and it's been really cool talking to different groups and getting some reaction. So I do want to take some questions if we have time. Before I do that, however, I want to read just one short passage from the book, which I think kind of encapsulates the kind of attitude that I'm proposing to be successful in business and at the same time to give back. In the 1950s, long before this is from a chapter called The Power of a Mensch. And a Mensch, for those that don't know that word, means it's a Yiddish word. Originally it was a German word. And the Yiddish word for a Mensch, for the German word for a Mensch, it means a man. The Yiddish connotation is a man, a person, what a person should be. Not just like a person, but an idealized form of a person. That's what a mensch is, the person that does the right thing. And my father was one of them, so that's how I learned firsthand how to be a mensch. In the 1950s, long before the government enacted laws to protect employees and prohibit workplace discrimination, my father, a food broker in New England, founded the Massachusetts Commission on Fair Employment Practices. Its name made it sound like a bona fide government agency, but it wasn't. Dad and a friend took it upon themselves to speak out for workers. They would investigate reports of discrimination and write press releases to bring attention to the issue. They were bloggers before their time. Dad always taught me that people are capable of tremendous things. An employer's role is to give them a chance, supply them with the tools they need, and help them reach their potential. I saw the benefits of treating your employees right firsthand and developed what I call the 14-piece bucket rule. That term came from the college summer I spent traveling around the country working odd jobs. In Denver, where I worked as a delivery boy for a chicken place, the owner had a policy of not giving the employees any free food. I spent long hours inhaling the aroma of freshly fried chicken. My mouth was watering. I'm only human after all, but I knew the policy. It just seemed unfair to me. It felt cruel and inhumane to put a 20-year-old kid around food all day and tell him he can't eat. So after a while, let's just say the 16-piece chicken buckets, they started becoming 14-piece chicken buckets. Later, when I ran Noah's, I made sure that our policy allowed employees to eat as much food as they wanted. To me, that simply seems like good sense. Instead of tempting my employees into sneaking a bit, I invited them to feel like a part of the enterprise. Thanks very much for inviting me to USF this afternoon. We have time for questions?
I have questions, so I'll let you honor the...
Please. And speak up loud, and there's no such thing as a bad question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think like Jews are 1% of the population in the U.S. So did you have any idea that Noah's would take off by just like kind of gearing your business towards Jews?
Well, Jews are a little over 2%, but who's counting? What I learned what I learned was that the bagel business was spreading out of the Jewish neighborhoods and into the mainstream. And it had already happened in Wichita, Kansas, and it had already happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and in places where there were even less Jewish populations than in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I became convinced and learned that bagels wasn't really a Jewish food anymore, it was an American food, but that San Francisco didn't have really a great bagel place. And that this, as I think I mentioned in the talk, the sophistication of this community was such that it could handle great food of any kind of ethnic description, and that there was a void that I was filling by opening the store. And although the first neighborhood was in somewhat of a Jewish neighborhood, and that helped because there was some familiarity, by the time we started opening more and more stores, the growth of the bagel business was phenomenal. We kind of hit it at the right time, where it was leaving the ethnic neighborhood and hitting the mainstream. So it was a timing thing. In the back?
So my parents used to shop back in Massachusetts at Fred Circus.
Okay.
And I wanted to know, when you first started those stores, or any stores for that matter, where did you go for your intelligence? Where did you find out what the best location would be to open up?
You talking about a location search?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. In those days, I was pretty naive, all right? And I didn't have a real sophisticated concept of location. I had a fairly well-developed concept as to what I wanted to do with the store, and that was an amalgam of two different stores. One store was probably there were two other natural food stores in the city of Boston. One was called Erewhon, and it was quite a good-sized place. And I saw what they were doing, all right, in terms of their presentation, in terms of the food they carried, and so forth. I emulated that operation. The other operation I emulated was a houseware store called Bowl and Board that had sort of rustic artisan-made housewares. So I had the concept of the two businesses that I wanted to sort of put together into one store. But in terms of where it was a matter of I was selling salad bowls on the sidewalk in front of my brother-in-law's bookstore in Coolidge Corner in Brookline, and a store came up for rent, 3 blocks down. And so I took it. I mean, it was really like as crude as that. What I'm so impressed with now is that, you have so many more people going to business school than did in those days, that the whole level of sophistication has elevated. The fact that you can, ask me a question with location search and the metrics and all of these very sophisticated, methodologies that we have to find locations, really changes the whole game. And if you're going to be in the retail business, you better get savvy with how you figure out the demographics, and they match up and line up with your concept and so forth. But I want to say one thing that I think is very important. When after selling Noah's, I went to work for Einstein Brothers as a consultant for a year during the transition of Noah's when we had sold the business, and they showed me their sophisticated computer models and how they had identified store locations. And this thing was pretty amazing, all right? And they plugged the input and so forth and so on. So I went into one of these locations at one point. It was in Pacific Palisades. This was in a dead shopping center at the very end of a dead shopping center next to a cat groomer. Okay, I mean, it's about the most unappetizing location from any number of different standpoints. And I asked the real estate guy, with all your sophisticated computer models, how the heck did you wind up with something like this? Well, the analysts said we had to be in Pacific Palisades. It was important, before the competition came in, and, our computer model showed this and whatever. There's no substitute, location search is an art and a science. And I think the science part is extremely important, But if you don't focus on the gut feel, if you're not walking those streets, if you're not identifying your target customer and kind of rubbing shoulders with that potential demographic and really getting a first-hand sense as to what it's going to be like, you're only doing something from a out of a textbook, and it's not a real-life kind of analysis. And I would encourage all of you, as you sharpen your analytic skills and you get incredibly sophisticated in the use of technology and as a tool to business, to make sure that you know that there's an art to it too. There's a people component, there's a gut feel component, and don't leave those out of the equation. Long answer to your question, but I think I got your question answered, and probably 4 other questions as well. Right in the front.
Yeah, so what strategies did you pursue to help your business go through the slow economics so far?
In the case of Noah's Bagels,
Yes.
Noah's Bagels, interestingly enough, opened in a recession in 1989. It wasn't anything like what we have now, but it turned out that we had a recession-proof business, because what was happening was, for people that would go out and buy a steak dinner, they couldn't afford that, so they would buy a bagel with cream cheese. That was a little bit more expensive than the guy's bagel down the street that was maybe 40 cents, and ours was 50 cents, and maybe if you had cream cheese, it was $1.50, but it was a whole lot cheaper than a steak dinner for $15 or so. So it turns out that we had a business that actually worked well in a recession, and that there's not a lot of them, but in the Great Depression in the 30s, miniature golf and movies were a great business. So it isn't always the case that in a recession a business won't be successful. But having said that, be very careful before you go into anything in this day and age, because it is tough out there. You need to do more research, and you need to be more careful than you ever did in the past. Yes?
What kind of resources or expertise do you pull in for developing the product in terms of like bagel making techniques or the operational food service?
I think that, is this on? No, this is just, I don't know, somehow this thing has died on me. But, if I go in, no, that's not going to do anything. Anyway, I'll talk loud. Can you hear me? Okay. One thing that's held me in good stead is knowing what I don't know and really like bringing in the expertise. I'm not above, inviting out someone to a lunch and trying to pick their brain, or in some cases, finding the need to hire the best and brightest to do things that I'm not expert at, because none of us have expertise in everything. But a business like a space launch, you need to hit pretty much 99.9% of the targets in terms of the various functionalities in business in order for it to be successful. And so it's really quite important that you bring in the proper talent. In the case of the bagel making, in the course of looking around for a year and trying to figure out whether I wanted to go into the bagel business, I not only came upon a great recipe that I was determined to get, but I also came across a guy who knew everything about bagel technology, because he'd been doing it for 40 years. So I bought the recipe from the guy, and I put him on a contract basis where he would give us advice, he would come out periodically when we'd be expanding, and made sure that every step along the way we had an expert on the job that knew how to do it and do it right.
Back in business.
We're back in business. So now we need at least a couple more questions to warrant this work on the technical end. Yes?
Hi.
Hi.
I heard you say that your friends and family invested in your businesses, but how else did you finance your 4 businesses that were successful?
Pretty much they were all, at least they started out as bootstrapped operations. They started out with limited resources and and you know, a shoestring, like enough to pay a couple of months' rent and a little bit of salaries and not a lot more. And it was a different time and it was a different place. Okay, I mentioned this earlier this afternoon. Many businesses fail because they don't have the capital to see them through the lean times. And when you, not only lean times, but we talked about recessions. You could start a business in an upswing market and then have it, you know, be in a recession and have a viable enterprise, but you have to see it through the couple of years. I strongly advise having some kind of cushion available. I was able to get revolving lines of credit from banks during some of my business endeavors. And for that, you're going to sometimes have to put up collateral, and it may be a house, a car, or whatever. But it's important to have some cushion, you know, to fall back on. In my case, I was able to borrow money from family and friends, but that comes at a price too. You know, that you don't want to strain your relationship with your family. That's, you know, I mentioned this in my talks, but I really couldn't have built Noah's Bagels without my brother Dan, who was invaluable. But it was good that the business went well and that the rising tide floated all the ships. Because when a business isn't going well, it can really strain a family relationship. And whatever you do, make sure that your friends and family come number one and your business comes number two. And I'm saying that really sincerely, because when you get to be my age, you start looking back at things, and it's sometimes not about, you know, the money I wished I'd made, but it's like the family that I wish I, you know, was closer to, or the friends that I wish I had, I'm still in touch with, and I'm not because of one reason or another. And a business is a great way to lose friends, believe me. So it's important to keep your priorities straight. All the way in the back.
Throughout your entrepreneurial career, what were some of the common hurdles that you faced and how did you overcome them?
That's a great question. I think that the most common hurdle was something I alluded to before, was being way out of my learning curve. You know, every one of my businesses I sort of learned on the job. I didn't know anything about the housewares business. I didn't know anything about importing. I didn't really know anything about natural foods. I certainly knew nothing about bagels. I had no idea about selling religious gifts. And I think that was kind of what turned me on about them, was that I was like, you know, it was like, can I learn enough to keep myself above water? You know, it was like kind of like something between like an extreme sport and a death wish. But it kept me on the edge of my seat, and it was a real, you know, exciting adrenaline rush. At this point, I'm like, are you kidding? You really did that stuff? You're crazy. So I you know, looking back at it, I think I would have brought a lot more expertise into these businesses a lot earlier than I did. I think I was able to succeed at them because they were the right thing at the right time, and I threw so much energy into them and so much attention that I, you know, I was a competitive person, and I wanted to make that very clear. I think it's being, you know, a Mensch is not a pushover. Okay? Any business that you go into, you know, it's good to do the right thing. It's good to take care of your employees, your customers, your communities. But business is hardball, and you have to play hardball, and you have to, you know, meet the competition and outdo the competition. And being a competitive guy with a lot of energy was able to, I think, in some cases, make up for, you know, the lack of knowledge of the businesses. One more question.
What is the short and long term for Noah Bagel?
Well, I wanted to make a public statement that I sold Noah's Bagels 14 years ago. So if you love Noah's Bagels, I sold it 14 years ago. And if you don't even want to walk into Noah's Bagels, I still sold it 14 years ago. So in any event, I'm off the hook. But I have been doing book signings at some of the Noahs around the area. And I've been talking to some of the senior management, and they are actually doing quite well. When we sold the business, they had 38 stores. There are now 77 stores. It's part of a big national conglomerate. Fundamentally, every bagel store of any consequence in the United States is owned by one company now. So it's you know, like many business, it's concentrated but they seem to be doing a good job day in, day out, because things are increasing, and management was very complimentary to me on giving them a good base from which they could build a successful business, which they definitely appear to have done and been able to maintain it.
Yes, the last question.
Yes, sir.
Rabbi Hillel's statement and his values and your notion that we need to balance the me with a little bit more we for the future, for this century, for this generation. Can you just talk a little bit to close about the need for business to contribute to building more of that we to balance out what we're good at, the me?
Thank you. That's a great question and an important way to finish up. Look, it's always a challenge in business to balance, you know, what you know deep down in your gut is the right way to go, and the profit motive and the greed factor. We're all tempted, you know. I mean, there's money on the table. We all want to pick it up, okay? You know, maybe it's not our money to pick up, you know, and maybe even though there's no one in the room to look at us when we're picking up that money that's not ours, we should be thinking that that person is in the room. So it's really like it comes down to sort of the golden rule. You know, what's hurtful unto others, don't do yourself. So it's a question of doing that when people are looking and when people aren't looking. But I can tell you that as you go forward in your careers, you're going to be a lot more comfortable inside your skin, and you're going to have a lot more successful family life. And at the end of the day, when you look back at your career, you're going to be a lot more happy about what you've accomplished in life if you do it the right way and you don't cut corners, because it'll eventually come back to haunt you. Thanks so much.